is from the Code of Federal Regulations at 27 CFR 555.218.
Thank you, Pat. So there's a production facility, a blasting agent storage facility, building, and a dynamite building. We are recommending that building envelopes be placed on the face of plat to limit development outside that build radius. And then we're also asking for a note be placed on the face of plat alerting owners that the facility is located next door. So when we look at the map, this is from the order of decision in 2000, and I did reach out to Dyno Nobel, and they did confirm that this map remains accurate. But this is the buildings in question that require a no build radius. And we had some of our staff produce this map showing those different radiuses of no build zone. And when we overlay that with the proposed subdivision, you can see that it will affect the lots on the west side. The lot that's going to be affected the most is probably lot 6. But if we take a measurement, they still have about 220 feet at its closest property line. The hearing examiner heard the request on September 21st, 2023 during a public hearing, and they did subsequently recommend approval. They found the site is compatible with the surrounding areas, consistent with the comprehensive plan. In the comprehensive plan, it addresses that third bullet line, that infrastructure, there needs to be a reduced need for to extend infrastructure, and that it does meet that requirement in the comprehensive plan. And of course, the internal road, as I've stated before, has to meet highway district standards. And then the hearing examiner does recommend that safety radius be accommodated. And I stand for any questions that you have.
Commissioner Brooks? No, no questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next up will be the applicant, and that is Mr. and Mrs. Brandon and Lisa Gardam, and their representatives are John Magnuson and Connie Kruger.
For the record, my name is Connie Kruger, and Amy's going to pull up our presentation.
You know what, Lynn?
And for those of you who are on the Zoom call or dialed in, if you could please mute yourself, we'd appreciate it. And Connie, you have 30 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I was wondering if I, so am I just,
If you can mute yourself, that'd be great. We appreciate it.
okay. Some of the information that I'm providing tonight, Amy has touched on, so I'll just go over it very briefly. But again, we have a map of the property located here. You can see the 3 pins where the 3 properties are. And you can see that we're very close to the Twin Lake, Spirit Lake area. There are a couple of key items with this subdivision. We'll cover some of these in more detail, but just kind of the takeaways are that we're in a rural zone with a 5-acre minimum lot size, which is what we're proposing, and single-family residential is a use of right in this zone. We are in an area where there are other rural properties that are similar, and also where services exist. Highway 41 and West Scarcelo are state highways and major collectors, so we're accessing right onto roads that are capable of carrying the traffic that we have. We're also in an area where we have fire districts, we have highway districts, we have school districts, emergency responders. We're not in remote rural areas of the county where those services cannot be provided. We have worked quite a bit in advance of even making the application with Lakes Highway District on our approach location, and there was a comment letter from Lakes related to that. We have hired a traffic engineer, and we're working through some site distance things and other things along Scarcelo Road related to our design. As Amy touched on, all of the agencies have approved this with development-related conditions. And we are served with utilities and roads, and all of those will be installed by the owner at their cost. And we also will be paying all taxes and fees to mitigate any of our other impacts. So just a quick little recap. This is our plat, and it's 14 lots. This road in the center is a private road, and that will actually be built to a public road standard. Again, you're familiar with where our access is, and then right next to us to the east is a nearly identical subdivision. It's not a 60 lot, it's actually a 16 lot, so we've got a little typo there directly to the east. The comprehensive plan designation is country, and this is in the Selkirk sub-area. Importantly, in the county's comprehensive plan, in the country designation, residential subdivisions are allowed, and actually cluster subdivisions are discouraged. So the type of, the pattern of development that we have here is actually what's encouraged by the comprehensive plan. And also subdivisions are to be designed to reduce the need to extend infrastructure, and they should be self-contained. And so you'll see that with our proposal that our water, our sewer, our roads are all, of course our roads are on site, but all of our utilities are on site. And we're not extending utilities again out into these rural remote areas that are there and available in the area for other subdivisions. Our zoning is rural, and in the rural zone, again, it's a zone that is suitable to rural residential uses. And so we're consistent with that. Our lot sizes range from 5 to 7.5 acres, so the minimum is 5 acres. This shows you some of the surrounding zoning, and this is rural zoning, so to the north, the east, the south, and the west, directly around us, we have, we are rural, and we are in a surround of rural. The surrounding land use to the north, east, and the south is all primarily rural. If you go out a little further, you see a variety of other activities that are occurring, which Amy hit on. What was brought up today is the facility that is to the direct west of us, and that is the Dyno Nobel. They are a blasting agent manufacturer. We actually did not know that they were located there until a week before we went to the hearing examiner. And so we did not see any of the maps with any of the radius until I believe it was the day before our hearing, maybe even the day of our hearing. So, you know, staff did a good job of trying to map that out quickly and show it to us, but I just want to make you as the commissioners aware that when we went into that hearing, we had about 1 day of understanding how this might impact us from a geographic perspective, and we didn't have a lot of time to look into the supporting documentation. So we have John Magnuson here, who has looked into that a little bit further for us, and he'll be speaking after I finish my presentation. And a couple of other notes on that. The notice related to that conditional use permit, there was a requirement that it be recorded to title, other documentation be produced related to that. So nothing about this was within our title, nor was it on our seller disclosures or buying and selling disclosure. So we'll get into that a little further. Again, the existing physical environment, this is less than 3% slope across the site. We don't have any wetlands, riparian areas, no floodplains, and we're in an area that does not have any hydric soils. So suitable for development. As far as transportation goes, we've talked a little bit about West Scarcello Road. The map that you see to the right, that is the colored map, you can actually see, and it's a little bit hard, but you see kind of the purple line work of Scarcello Road. And what that is that's showing you that in the regional transportation plans that is designated as a major collector. So it is intended now and into the future to carry higher volumes of traffic. We've talked a little bit about our road construction. We did receive a comment letter from Lakes Highway District related to turn lanes, approach design. Again, we're working through that. And we also will have a road maintenance agreement for our internal road. Little information on trips. We have 3 existing lots, so we'll have 11 new lots. And there are 9.44 vehicle trips per day per lot is how that works from a traffic generation perspective. Up in the upper right is the rural local access section. This comes from the Associated Highway District Standards for a local access road. And you can see that it's fairly wide, 2-lane widths. It will be asphalt, built with a substantial base. Sidewalks are not required on roads like this that are in rural areas under these adopted highway district standards. So as to water, again, we'll have our own wells on each lot. We do have a hydrogeologic report that supports compliance with the county's water standards. Our fire response will be by Northern Lakes, and with these lots being over 5 acres in size, there's not a requirement for hydrants. And each lot will have its own sewer on site. This is located over the aquifer, so test holes will not be required by Panhandle Health. So we've hit on agency comments, but I think notably the point being that all of the agencies have approved this, or they've approved it with some type of development-related condition, and I think that we have one neutral agency and then another that just provided information. The hearing examiner recommendation was for approval with staff recommended conditions. And we do have the one staff recommended condition that Amy brought up that we want to discuss further today that is related to Dyno Nobel. So that is actually why we requested the hearing to come before you, is to be able to talk about that condition a little bit further. Given the timeliness and what was happening around the hearing, we really feel like we've looked into it further and we want to have this opportunity to talk to you about that. So with that being said, if you have any questions for me, I'm here to answer them, but I will also next turn it over to John.
Thank you. Commissioner Brooks?
No.
No, I have no questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's John Magnuson. I'm here for the applicant. I didn't know, and Mr. Braden, if the comments I sent in are already in the record or if I need to introduce them now. I didn't know if that was in the packet.
Jennifer, are they,
Is that what Amy handed us?
no, it's a letter from John Magnuson.
Oh, yes, it is in the record.
I had sent that yesterday and I didn't know. I brought an additional copy if it's not
We
in the
can
record.
enter it now just to make sure.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah,
B 1003.
Well, Commissioners, I appreciate the time tonight. I'll try to be brief. In a lexicon in North Idaho, this is sort of one of those things that is kind of atypical. The application that comes forward tonight touches all the bases and does all the appropriate things and is the right place in the right region and everything else. But then we've got this issue with Dyno next door. And how did this come to be? The only reason we're here tonight is because of that zone that's overlaid and recommended by staff and the hearing examiner the last time, which, as Ms. Kruger indicated, was something that came up literally like 7 days before the hearing. And I thought it, in terms of your decision as a result of tonight's public hearing, that we have since kind of fleshed out some additional information, and you ask how this can come to be. And it's summarized in my exhibit, so I won't go through everything in detail, but to give you the highlights is that in 2000, Dyno Nobel's predecessor, Atlas Powder, had a facility as indicated operating on the adjacent property. At that time, there were no approvals or et cetera that would allow them to expand onto or affect the property rights of this property, which was owned at the time by Michael Scarsello. They sought a conditional use permit in 2000 to expand their facilities on their property. And as a result of the approval of that conditional use permit in November of 2000, and a copy is in the record, they had the potential with their new structures to, under this zone overseen by the ATF, to have an impact on their neighbor's property. So which is kind of an odd scenario at the outset. When I look at this, you're going in on your property as a private property owner to get an approval that is predicated upon you interfering with your adjacent neighbor's rights. I mean, it's like if one of you fellows owned 5 acres out in the county and the guy next door wanted to do a blasting plant, and he's gonna impede your ability to use half of your 5 acres. I mean, that's not allowed. That's a private condemnation for a private party, and that's kind of the antithesis of America. But I digress. So the county said, your approval is granted conditionally to expand your facilities, but you gotta go out and get the written approval of these adjacent property owners. And then you gotta record that, because it's gotta be a matter of title so people know when they purchase the property what the effect is. And so 2 years, that was the condition of approval. 2 years later, in my submittal, the county wrote to Alaska Powder, the predecessor to Dino, and said, you haven't done many things that were required. And one of the things you haven't done is get the consent of your adjacent neighbors. And that still wasn't done. In 2004, the property was sold to Dino. It wasn't done before, and it wasn't done after, and it still hasn't been done to this day, which is where my folks come in. In 2021, they bought the property from the estate of Michael Scarsello. And it's in, again, my submittal, we have a statement from the title officer that at the time was closed. The CUP isn't recorded, nor is there any consent as a condition of the CUP to allow the invasion of the rights of these properties. And so that wasn't done at the time. In fact, I put in, just so you know the background, so there was an affirmative disclosure from the seller, the estate of Michael Scarsello, that there weren't any governmental approvals that affect your right to use this property in any way, shape, or form. Very affirmative disclosure to that. I mean, no disclosure of it. It was said there weren't any. So the folks go through the process of preparing their submittal and then coming before the hearing examiner. They get in front of the hearing examiner a week before you're advised of this conditional use permit. And so the staff, nobody's got a problem. The staff prudently recommended this. We had an opportunity to look at it in greater detail. I have had discussions with Director Callahan about how we deal with this, and then I look at this tribunal is here tonight, and I'm realistic enough to know that we do have a blasting plant next door, but we have an issue about whether the blasting plant has the ability to go over and onto our property. You folks are sitting here and you've got a 2000 conditional use permit that is still sitting out there that arguably hasn't been fulfilled in accordance with its conditions. And I think as, stewards of the public good, you want to act in a manner that protects the public interest. We, on the other hand, we don't have a problem with Dino. And we don't have a problem with Dino doing whatever it wants to do on its property, as long as Dino does the things on its property that don't invade our property, because we never consented to it, nor did anybody else. So as I discussed this in concept with Director Callahan, the suggestion I had, and he can certainly chime in, which differs from what the hearing examiner did, is that at some place in some forum, there's going to be a debate about whether or not this zone as depicted on the exhibit over onto these 4 lots is enforceable, because these folks never consented to it. I don't think that's a debate that fairly stated is within your bailiwick tonight to determine, because that would require some notice to Dino Nobel above and beyond what they've gotten for this process and a participation. But it is a debate that will happen somewhere else at some day in some forum. And if we are correct and we succeed in that debate in front of the appropriate forum, and it is determined that the conditional use permit cannot allow them to use their property interfering with our rights within the range shown on the exhibit, without our consent, we don't consent, then we would like the ability to return to the planning department, community development, administratively, under stated conditions, if this is found unenforceable, to ask Director Callahan to administratively remove that condition, so that we don't find ourselves having to come back with a whole hearing to amend a plat and go through the whole process again, and then a hearing examiner, and then back to you to remove something that probably shouldn't be there, but in an exercise of prudence, you're going to put some language on there tonight, and that's really the basis for our request. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioner Brooks?
No question.
I'd be curious if you could just kind of restate maybe in a slightly different way the kind of language that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think the language would obviously have to be mutually agreeable to Director Callahan, but the language would say, they're going to put some demarcation on the plat of some language. And and that'll be like, note 6 to the plat. And we say, note 6 arises under conditional use permit entered in 2002 or 2000 under number X. And if that condition is subsequently determined by a court of competent jurisdiction to be invalid insofar as it affects the applicant's properties, the Director of Community Development can administratively remove that condition.
And right now, the condition is largely based upon, I would assume, kind of a safety rationale?
As I understand it, when they went to expand their facilities in 2000, they were expanding, I could be wrong, but the proximity and potentially the use in some manner that pushed their potential impact out farther. This isn't to say, as I understand it, that they can't use their they can't not use their property for their purposes. There are some uses that were allowed under the 2000 conditional use permit that may not be allowed. They might have to restrict their uses. They're not going to have to close, but might have to restrict it. So, our position is that I understand that the county is not going to cancel the conditional use permit tonight. That would be unrealistic, but I think it will be ultimately whittled back, and it shouldn't affect these people's property.
But the issue is the fact of building a structure within that ring. And the assumption is that that ring is like the edge of where a safety line is around that facility.
Correct. And so I say, there's more than 4 lots here. So if it's approved with that condition, as I suggest, and then we would have the building envelopes and some demarcation of a restriction, we would be able to go ahead with the development, knowing that those are potentially out there, not impacting 13 of the 17 lots. But if we can, in fact, have a court of competent jurisdiction state that that can't affect those people's rights. And of course, Dyna Nobel would be a party to that too, because we can't affect their rights without them being in. And if that came to be, then Director Callahan could take that condition off of the plat.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to, I understand the component of affecting the property rights with their use at that, at the facility. I'm trying to establish is that based upon a safety issue, and then they would have to change their operations to reduce that safety ring, in essence.
I believe it would be it's characterized as a safety issue. I don't know all the inner workings of the explosive manufacture but that's where the boundary is. I believe it to be characterized as a safety issue from their standpoint.
Yeah.
But I would say, it's characterized as a safety issue, but at the end of the day, the right to engage in conduct that makes it a safety issue is predicated upon what I contend is like clearly a violation of somebody's private property rights. I mean, you can't go in and ask for a conditional use permit on your property that's gonna go allow you to impair, as for private purposes, a material portion of your neighbor's property and without their consent. That's effectively, like a public condemnation for a private use. And it's just, in fact, but the ironic thing is when I get back to like these North Idaho things that pop out of the woodwork after all these years, I kind of look back at the conditional use permit and it said, as a condition of this, you got to go get these people's written consent. And what if you don't? I mean, it said you got to do all this stuff in 2 years. It didn't specifically say do that in 2 years, but it said you got to do many other things in 2 years, and you can't build these structures until you do it. And they never did it, and then they built the structures, and then life goes on, and a tree fell in the forest and nobody heard it. And that's just kind of how it happened. So, I mean, frankly, I would say, again, if somebody at the county, and again, I'm not placing any blame or anything, if somebody at the county had noticed this 15 years ago, they probably would have called up Dyna Nobel and said, you got to restrict your use until you get those people to sign off. but it just happened.
Yeah, I understand. And certainly, you come across some very interesting situations.
You haven't seen this one before.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if somebody really likes buying the property and having the title report and the title policy and say, what are you talking about, this conditional use permit for a blasting factory next door? I never heard of that one. So that's
Yeah.
pretty much how it happened,
Okay.
a week before the hearing.
Well, I appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thanks.
So, thank you. Is there anyone else from the applicant side that would like to speak, or? You have a few more minutes. No? Okay. All right, next will be public testimony from people. We'll start with Lauren Scarsello. Scarsello, excuse me.
There you go.
Neutral, wish to speak?
Well, I wrote neutral-ish. I'm Lauren Scarsello. I reside at North 22389 Kevin Road, Rathdrum. I did write down kind of a prepared statement, and I can certainly speak to this as well.
And real quick, I'm sorry, but for everyone who speaks, you have 3 minutes.
How come they got 7?
Because they were the applicant and they get up to 30.
Well, I may request conversation at a later date. I'm speaking on behalf of our family ranch. This is a heritage ranch. A heritage ranch is a ranch that's been in existence or farm for more than 100 years. Our place has been in continuous ag production since 1910. The Didon Nobel site mentioned has been there since 1963. It has a proven track record. They've been proven a good neighbor. This is exactly nothing new. The footprint has changed little. I will mention this, that the no-build zone isn't relatively to the maximum amount of product on site. To my knowledge at this time, there isn't that much product on this site. A lot has been said lately about preserving open space. Again, I'm not here to irritate my neighbors, but I am here to protect what is near and dear to me. This lease has been a piece of the financial puzzle of our ranch for a good many years, obviously, and I make no bones about it. The fact that it is part of our financial situation is a very big reason why we even have a ranch. It's not my habit to discuss ranch finances, but I'll be very brutal. We get a check from this lease in November. We write a check to you kind people in December in the form of property taxes. That's just how it goes. Nobody's ever been to Hawaii on this money. Setbacks already exist on the western border of both of these parcels, not only this 80 acres, but the 80 acres to the north that will no doubt be platted before too long. And that is because of the main Bonneville transmission power line, which feeds into the Scarsello substation belonging to Kootenai Electric, which feeds the bulk of the northern part of the county. So there are already some guidelines in place. I believe it's the job of the planning department to maintain the character of surrounding lands. This subdivision will be built on lands that was also belonged to my extended family, be that as it may. I would have bought it, but I don't know how to pay for millions of dollars with cows. It's beyond me. But this too is heritage land. So it's been said that this fits in. It really only fits in with change. I looked up the definition of fit in the Webster's dictionary. It did not mention 5-acre tracts. And I lost my track here, guys. I'm sorry. This is hugely emotional for me. I hope you can understand this. You know, these lots, and I've talked with Brandon and Lisa before. Again, I have no bones with my neighbors. My goal is to get along. That being said, they're going to sell these lots as rural living. They're going to sell these lots with the country lifestyle. They're going to sell these lots with mountain views and privacy. Those lucky enough to purchase these lots bordering us will border a heritage ranch. There's the no-build zone goes both ways. These lots in question here will have privacy on steroids. The only thing they're going to be associated with is grazing livestock and seasonal farming activities. As always, I'm available for comments or questions, 661-6090. You know, this is real. This isn't the Yellowstone television series. This is real. And And I'm happy to act as a liaison with the planning department, with Dino Nobel, and my neighbors. I said that before. And I think we can work this out, guys. It's not the end of the world. But again, this fits in with change. And I understand the 5-acre rule. I serve on your Aquifer Protection District Board. I serve on a number of boards. I understand this.
Mr.
So I don't know where
Scarsello,
my 3 minutes lies.
it went past.
Okay, well, I
went
thank you
past.
for the opportunity. Here's a ranch letter, Christmas letter. You boys read this, or
Thank
people
you.
read this.
Thank you.
You can see what kind of a year I've had. This is real.
And thank you for coming out.
You bet. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
We'll read that in as 1004.
Okay, next will be opposed. First person is Diana Sheridan, opposed and does not wish to speak. Is that correct? Okay. Next is John, I want to say Powell, opposed, does not wish to speak. Next is Ron Hartman, opposed, does not wish to speak. Is there anybody else who would like to give any comments, public testimony?
I'm participating via Zoom and would like to provide public testimony,
Okay,
if
just
possible.
please state your name.
Okay, my name is Ross Davidson. I'm counsel for Dino Nobel.
Okay, you have
Can I-
minutes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm participating remotely via Zoom. Unfortunately, couldn't be there in person this evening. As I mentioned, I represent Dino Nobel, which, as has been noted, operates an explosives manufacturing and storage facility in Kootenai County.
Pardon me real quick. For anyone else that's on the line, if you could please mute yourselves, that would be very appreciated.
Is that Ross?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that Ross?
Yeah, as has been noted, Dino Nobel operates an explosives manufacturing and storage facility in Kootenai County as permitted by the conditional use permit that's been mentioned, issued in the year 2000. Dino Nobel did receive a copy of the hearing examiner recommendation for the proposed major subdivision, which includes requirements aligning with the terms of the conditional use permit, as has also been noted. As has been mentioned, there was a comment in the staff analysis that there were no records confirming satisfaction with certain condition of the conditional use permit relating to negotiation of notices to title with landowners whose properties are within the no-build radii noted in the conditional use permit. Based on this observation, in the absence of definitive confirmation on that point, and really out of an abundance of caution, Dino Nobel has moved forward to ensure that the condition is satisfied and has sent information to the county staff confirming this. I believe that's the information that was admitted into the record at the beginning of the hearing. Wanted to also, in light of the focus on Dino Nobel's operations by Mr. Magnuson and the applicants, just respond to a few items very briefly. Although, as noted by Mr. Magnuson, this is not a hearing about Dino's permit. Specifically, did want to clarify some things. As has been noted, at the time this conditional use permit was issued in the year 2000, Dino Nobel was not the owner of the property it now owns, or the operator of the facility in question, Alaska Pacific Powder, was. And because of that, Dino Nobel doesn't know or doesn't have direct documentation on whether or not negotiations for the notices to title occurred at that time. There may have been discussions and information provided at that time. It's just not within our records. I do want to point out at the time, the owners of the properties in question that were affected by the no-build zone were Dino Nobel directly, Arthur Scarsello, who was a co-applicant for the conditional use permit and certainly was involved and aware, Michael Scarsello, who was a lesser leased property to Dino Nobel and was certainly aware of the restrictions, and I imagine they were probably documented in the lease, and the state of Idaho. Dino, to my knowledge, has never received any notice of violation or other communications alleging that the condition was not satisfied at the time by Alaska Pacific Powder. I also do want to point out that there is no time limit on the condition. And as has been mentioned, in the absence of documentation and out of an excess of caution, Dino has taken steps currently to address this condition. and to satisfy that. And then just a point of clarification, because it was a question that was raised, building habitable structures within the no-build zone would be in violation of ATF agency requirements and would impact Dyno's ability to operate. Happy to answer any questions.
No, but your time did run out, so we thank you very much for your comment there.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, is there anyone else online?
Yes, sir. There are a few people. If there's anyone on Zoom at this time that would like to speak to this topic, please unmute yourself and go right ahead.
Doesn't sound like there is
Apparently,
anyone.
they're here for the next.
All right, there's a gentleman in the front row. Did you want to speak?
Yes, sir.
Randy, this has to do with the Timberland Estates?
The towers?
No. This is not the tower. No. Anybody else would like to speak? Okay, the applicant has 15 minutes to rebut.
Thank you, Commissioners. John Magnuson. Again, I won't take 15 minutes. It seems that the only issue here is the one about Dyno Nobel. And nothing I said before in terms of what we would recommend has changed. I just think some additional information or clarification is helpful to put this in the appropriate context. And I appreciate the comments of Mr. Scarsello and Mr. Davidson. That paragraph 6.10 in the original conditional use permit, as I indicated, said you will negotiate with the state of Idaho. You'll negotiate with Michael Scarsello and Arthur Scarsello. If I'm not mistaken, I think Lauren Scarsello has succeeded in some fashion to the Arthur Scarsello property because the applicant has succeeded to the Michael Scarsello property, and the state of Idaho is still there. So there's no consent from the state of Idaho. There's no record or evidence of that. There's no recorded consent based on the title officer's analysis conducted yesterday as to the Michael Scarsello property, which was sold by his estate to these individuals. And I'd like to note, I think it's important to note that these folks, the applicants, there was discussion, and I respect that, having lived here forever, about a heritage farm and all of these concepts. Notwithstanding, these folks paid the estate of Michael Scarsello $4.25 million for the property that is the subject of this application. So, there is change. It isn't always good, but it is always inevitable. But it isn't like, a fair deal wasn't struck and somebody knew that this would not be a heritage farm forever. But Mr. Davidson talks about, and it's in the record as an exhibit that was admitted at the outset of the hearing, about Dyno Nobel not knowing if there was compliance with the conditional use permit by Alaska Powder before Dyno Nobel purchased the property from Alaska Powder in 2004. There haven't been any action since until last week. And last week, Dyno Nobel sent a notice to the state of Idaho and my clients, the applicants, as the successor to Michael Scarsello. I presume they sent one on the other property, the Arthur Scarsello, but certainly as to the state of Idaho and as to the applicant saying, oh, by the way, essentially, there's this 23-year-old conditional use permit that at paragraph 6.10 says we're supposed to get your consent, and will you give your consent? Kind of a little late in the game for that, but to clarify, the applicant won't be consenting and doesn't consent. And then the question goes back full circle to one of the, kind of oddball comments I made. It's like this conditional use permit says, okay, you can build this expanded facility, you can use it for these purposes, but you got to go out and get the written consent of your neighbors, and then you got to tell the county that, or if you can't get it, you got to tell the county that. And then what? I mean, that's where I posit, and then what? If you can't get the consent, the county can't go impair or impact the neighbor's property to facilitate the public use or the private use next door. That's the question kind of the hour that's ultimately beyond tonight's hearing, but that helps to color and frame the issue in the right context. So I expect, and you know, maybe it's possible, with Mr. Scarsello's comments and Dinah Nobel, maybe we can get that resolved or limited in some fashion amicably, and then we could come back and advise the county of that, and he could administratively amend it consistent with what the parties agreed. If they can't, we'll have to do it another way.
Any questions? I presume then that the possibility exists that if there's a way to get that ring reduced so that it does not affect the parcels in question, that would be satisfactory to the applicant.
And again, the applicant doesn't have any beef with Dinah Nobel or the uses to which they put their property on their property.
Yeah.
But to the extent it goes over the line, it's never been consented and isn't today, so you're correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Yes, David.
Commissioners, David Callahan, Community Development Director. I agree with and like Mr. Magnuson's suggestion that we have the ability to administratively adjust these things depending on how it works out. That just makes for good practical planning.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do want you to be aware that it's conceivable that a court of competent jurisdiction could find that Nobel now is in the position of having non-conforming property and that they're entitled to continue to use this property in the way that they have for the last roughly 60 years. And under those circumstances, I would still like to be able, even if we don't have a ring that says no build, I'd still like something on the plat that puts people on notice that there's this adjacent company that does production of blasting materials.
Mm-hmm.
That just seems like good planning practice to me.
I understand. Well, hopefully there'll be an opportunity where some things can be worked out administratively before the final decision is made. So, thank you. Is there any other items that we should be covering for this particular public hearing item, Pat?
Don't believe
Okay.
so.
Can I move on to item number 2 then, or do you want a
Well,
motion?
You would need a motion to close the public hearing on this one,
Okay.
and then either deliberate or set a time for
So we'll do,
deliberations.
it'll end up being 2 motions for the evening. But Commissioner Brooks, since Commissioner Duncan's not here, I was thinking that we could maybe have our deliberations at the next meeting.
Sure.
Which would be January 11th at 10 a.m. Be the next open time. So we just need a motion to close public testimony and schedule the deliberations.
I move that we close public testimony in matter MSP 22-0009 Timberland Ranch.
And schedule the deliberations for January 11th. Yeah. I second the motion.
Phil Brooks.
Aye.
Chair Pro Tem Matari.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Next up is CUP 23-0003 I-90 Wolf Cell Site. Before we start, I would just like to make an opening statement for those that are here. Over time and through conversations with constituents, I have written and discussed that county commissioners must observe and follow applicable rules and laws when making decisions. This includes 47 U.S.C. 332 C7, which is United States Code Title 47, Chapter 5, Wireless or Radio Communications, Subchapter 3, Special Provisions Relating to Radio. Part 1, General Provisions, Section 332, Mobile Services. In Chapter 7, Part B, Paragraph I, it reads, "The regulation of the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities by any state or local government or instrumentality thereof, 1, shall not unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services, and 2, shall not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless services." Further, in Part B, Paragraph IV, no state or local government or instrumentality thereof may regulate the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the Commission's, that is, the FCC or Federal Communication Commission, regulations concerning such emissions. And so, in short, federal law prohibits local jurisdictions from denying cell tower construction if the facts show that wireless service will be prohibited or have the effect of being prohibiting, and jurisdictions cannot use the environmental effects of radio frequencies unless the Federal Communications Commission says there is an environmental effect with a particular radio frequency. This is federal law. And this is a condition that's put forth with every local jurisdiction, every state. And so with that said, we can go ahead and begin, and staff will provide the information on this particular CUP.
Again, my name is Amy Hillen, planner for Kootenai County, for the record. I seem to be missing my intro slide, but this is for, the project number is CUP 23-0003 for the cell tower wireless communication facility. The applicant in this case is Weiss Towers LLC. I do have some entries for the record. The public comment period ended on December 4th, but we did receive 19 additional comments as of 4 p.m. when our office closed. So I'd like to enter those officially.
That'll be B 1001.
Thank you.
I have two more items. The second item is a letter from Weiss Towers LLC, who is the applicant, and this is their response to the HE recommendation. It was sent to me after the comment period closed.
That'll be B 1002.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, I have a letter from David and Jill Spiker, who are the owners of the underlying property.
And that'll be B 1003. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The property is located in the 1700 block of Alder Creek Road, approximately 2.8 miles east of the intersection of Alder Creek and Wolf Lodge Creek Road. It is north and adjacent to I-90. The proposal is to construct a 150-foot tall lattice tower and equipment shelter. The area will be within a 100-foot by 100-foot fenced leased area, and their intention is to fill the gap of communication along Interstate 90. The property is located in the rural zone. According to the comprehensive plan, it is located in an area called Resource Recreation. The cell tower site is located in the southeast corner of the property. You get access by taking Alder Creek Road, and then there is an easement that heads southward on the neighboring property to the west. This continues through the property and provides access to the property to the east, but the tower access road continues south to the site. Here's a zoomed in site plan of the 100 by 100 foot area. And it is just to show that the tower itself will be at least 150 feet away from the closest property line. When we look at an aerial view, the topography varies in slope. You can see Alder Creek Road to the north here. You can see the access road heading through the property and providing access to the property to the east. And here's the tower access road providing access to this tower site. And then, of course, here's I-90. Verizon Wireless and actually Inland Cellular was the main communication that I had. But Verizon Wireless is also a part of the application. They provided radio frequency maps. Each of these maps depict what are known as reference signal receive power levels, which is a way to measure signal power. We got a phone call. The values are measured in minus dBm, and this format is always negative. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm going to show a map of these measurements. The higher the number, closer to zero, the higher the power of signal. Usable signal levels range between negative 75 dBm to the nearest to cell sites out to minus 120 dBm at the edge of coverage. Verizon Wireless provided the current radio frequency map for existing coverage. Here's the target area. The red dot is the intended cell site. And the closest tower is AMT. This is the American Tower Company is what it stands for. It's not an exact acronym, but that is what the company who owns the tower. So they're showing the blue area. You can kind of see some gaps in coverage. It depicts a coverage between 100 dBm and minus 110 dBm or non-existent in this area. And this is the existing coverage from the cell tower for AMT. When we look at proposed coverage, it is a little bit better. Red is an increase in coverage, and they predict a range between negative 70 dBm and minus 110 dBm with the installation of the tower. Inland Cellular also provided their own RF map. They predict coverage between minus 80 dBm and 110 dBm. When we look at photo simulations, the photo number 1 is shown from the access road location facing south toward the tower. So this is as you enter into the property, that access road. The second photo on the right is as you're heading eastbound on I-90, looking northward toward the property. The third picture, the vehicle is heading eastbound, but they're looking northwest toward the property where you would see the tower. And then the fourth picture to the right is how you would see the tower from the tower access road. Public agencies include Eastside Highway District. They would need an approach permit, as you would with most building permits, but they do advise that there are seasonal weight limits on Alder Creek. Cooney County and Fire and Rescue stated they had no concerns. Actually, they stated approved as submitted, but did not raise any concerns. Then our building department did state what they would need for a full building permit. I would note that they're also going to ask for any third-party special inspections, so any federal requirements would be a good example of that. Idaho State does electrical permitting. We contact Panhandle Health with everything, but of course, there's no wastewater being proposed at this site. And we did contact the sheriff's office, who had no comment. For the Federal Aviation Administration, according to the documentation provided by the applicant, this facility does not exceed obstruction standards and would not be a hazard to air navigation. They state that marking and lighting are not necessary in this case. We do not have a direct contact with FAA, so we do rely on the Division of Aeronautics and the Kootenai County Airport. They also agree with FAA, the location of the tower does not pose a hazard. ITD did recommend a collision avoidance light, however, but we will wait for FAA to look at the final plans to see if that is necessary. And they must follow FAA guidelines. They quote this specific form called the 7460. And the airport concurs with FAA and that a 7460 needs to be applied for. For public comment, prior to the hearing examiner's public hearing, we received 58 comments, and prior to this hearing, we received 36 comments. That includes the 19 late submittals that I entered into the record today. The concerns are aesthetics, light, noise pollution, health, environmental concerns, increase of fire risk, location within a residential area, and property values. According to my staff analysis, all requirements have been met as far as a complete application and meeting the findings. The application was sufficient and meets Kootenai County Code. Staff recommends that the tower be painted a neutral color to blend in with the natural landscape. Given the existing vegetation on site, no additional landscaping is required. And we did quote the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which mainly states that the basis of environmental effects of radio frequencies to the extent such facilities comply with FCC regulations. Essentially, we can't deny this application based on that. And the applicant has demonstrated the lack of cell coverage in this area and how the proposal will benefit the public. Staff recommends approval. For the hearing examiner's recommendation, we heard this request on October 5th, 2023. The hearing examiner did subsequently recommend approval as well. They found it was consistent with the comprehensive plan, satisfies Kootenai County Code, acknowledges that these types of facilities are heavily regulated and controlled by federal law and agencies, and leaves local jurisdictions with limited control. And they also state, cannot deny based on environmental health concerns, but does state that zoning can control certain aspects such as density and aesthetics. They found that the applicant did demonstrate that it's not feasible to co-locate on the other tower, the AMT tower. With regard to fire risk, they relied on Kootenai County Fire and Rescue to raise those concerns, and they did not. With regard to, there's a section in our code, 85132.C3, that talks about the applicant is required to define the need for the proposed facility at the proposed location and provide engineering data. The hearing examiner did find that the applicant satisfied this requirement, stating that they provided evidence as well as a drive test data to demonstrate the coverage gap, and that essentially county has a responsibility to provide adequate communication infrastructure for emergency services, and according to the applicant, provided some information that there are approximately 9 million passengers that traverse this roadway every year. With regard to property values, the hearing examiner was unconvinced that an argument about effects on property values should serve as a basis for denial. They're difficult to quantify and likely only one neighbor able to see the tower. The hearing examiner did mention a reduction in tower height may be warranted, but didn't have enough information to recommend that. And they asked that the BOCC consider a monopine design. The applicant will provide more information on that. So that was mentioned in the analysis, but it was not brought up at the hearing. So there hasn't really been a discussion on that. But the monopine design essentially is a cell tower that looks like a tree, faux vegetation, essentially. And I stand for any questions you have, and I will state that we are here today because a second hearing was requested and it was granted by the board.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brooks, any questions?
No questions, but I would like a little comfort break.
Sure. Why don't we, let's see, what do we have right now? Whoops. It's 7:08. Why don't we reconvene at 7:20? Would that work? So a 12-minute break? And then I do have some questions when we start back up. Commissioner Brooks, I asked if you had any questions. Did you have any questions?
I have no questions.
No? Okay. I have some questions. You mentioned that there were concerns in a previous hearing about that the tower might be close to a residential area. Was that a concern that was brought up?
I believe the concern was that it's, the closest property is located to the east, but this is generally a residential area in that it's rural.
It's rural.
Yeah, it's a prominent use is rural and agricultural uses in this area.
So residences are spread a little further out than
Yeah.
a subdivision, for example.
Yeah, they're fairly large parcels in this area.
Okay. And then tower height. How is the 150 feet determined, and what would be the circumstances for a lower tower height?
Right, so what is allowed by code is the 150 feet. That is allowed by code. When I read the hearing examiner's recommendation, what I get the sense of is that they struggled with it from an aesthetics point of view, and the fact that just trying to alleviate that it could be seen, I believe, but he didn't feel that there was enough evidence to definitively say it should be a recommendation. That was my take from reading his report.
Okay. But there's no knowledge of the height of the tower and affecting the service footprint or anything like that. It's really about aesthetics.
I think when that was raised by the hearing examiner, I believe that is the case. He was focusing on aesthetics and how this might be seen by surrounding property owners. As far as the coverage, unfortunately, I will have to probably have the applicant provide an answer to your question.
Okay, that's fair.
Not my area of expertise, so.
I understand. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, next up is the applicant. And I have, I believe it's Lydia Weiss and Bill, is it Brazel?
I'm Nathan Weiss, but Lydia Weiss is here also.
Okay,
And then we have a few people on Zoom also, I know.
okay, all right, great. You have 30 minutes to present your case.
Okay. Nathan Weiss, 601 R&R Heights, here representing Weiss Towers, Inland Cellular also. A little bit about Inland Cellular and Weiss Towers. Probably haven't heard of us. We've been serving down in the lower center of the state, Lewiston area, Lewis County, Idaho County, into Washington, Whitman County, and Benoit County, and we've been moved up into the north. My family has been in the telecommunication business since 1950, bought their first landline telephone company. We got in 1950, bought a company in Idaho, been serving Idaho since 68 down Lenore, Idaho, and did paging in Kootenai County, Coeur d'Alene area in the 90s, got into cellular in 89, and mobile services. Been a regulated company since 1954, when we folks bought the first telephone company. So very familiar with regulations and accommodating regulations and standing by them. Since 89, we constructed over 200 towers throughout Washington, Idaho. Most all of our towers now are registered with the FCC. They're not required to if your towers are under 200 feet, but we do register all of ours. We don't light them unless we absolutely need to. This location, I don't need to repeat a whole lot of things. I think the hearing examiner, you have the report and everything, and we'll talk about some of the things. So more to highlight on. We have licensed spectrum here in Kootenai County, 600 megahertz and 2.5. Verizon's looking and going on this tower also. They have obviously licensed spectrum to serve this area. Each carrier's spectrum covers differently. That's why we showed our map. We were going to put it there. AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon do use our networks to roam. All emergency phones could use our network if we were the only provider there. And so AT&T and T-Mobile, they don't have coverage there either, but if they dial 911, they would be able, along I-90, or if they can get our signal, they could actually call out. So we kind of look for those target areas where there's absolutely no coverage. So this is one area we looked at coming up here and said, there's a big need. So we selected this location because there's federal land and government lands east and west and south, and frequencies now don't bend and curve very good, so it's line of sight pretty much. And we need the elevation to be able to get down onto I-90. The county code, we'd like it, we generally build 190-foot towers. Your code states 150 max. The higher the tower, the more carriers you can put on it. And the topography and trees. Trees are a big factor, so getting higher and try and get the signal down to the I-90 area and to get your signal out further is important. So the height we definitely do need. If we didn't have that, we'd say, well, then grant us an ability to build another tower there. We have a leased area. We say, I don't know if our lease would allow it, but that's the purpose in the code, is not to have multiple towers. If you said 120 and build another one, then that to accommodate other carriers. But we do not want another tower. We want the 150 would be suitable for us and AT&T, or us and Verizon, and one more carrier. And if a third one, depending on their frequencies, if it gets through trees and things like that, they could go lower and provide their services. Let's see. Monopine, we recommend not doing it because of the antennas we're going to have on there. Just to try to cover the area. It's not a tall tower. If it's a taller tower, monopine could be more suited because you can actually blend them in better. So we're not in favor of monopine. I guess I will answer questions and turn my other time over. I got counsel on here, and Verizon's also on here to use as the applicant because they're co-applicants on this. So. I'll answer any questions directly now or let them go first.
Commissioner Brooks?
I didn't get your whole address. Where do you live?
I'm in Roslyn, Washington, by Ellensburg.
Okay, thank you.
And our headquarters, cellular headquarters is in Lewiston.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about how you determine where there's gaps and how you determine that there was a gap in service with this particular area where you want to put a footprint where the tower is?
I have multiple carriers' phones that I travel with, and so traveling I-90, there is no service in that area, that stretch. So that's one way. There's coverage maps. The coverage maps on the internet don't really represent the topography because they show a lot of coverage out there, and there's many places that are very underserved. And so driving around and been doing this all my life, so 34 years.
And what about outside of the highway? Is there a constituency that you've identified that's not getting service?
So there's to the north. There's no service to the north today on the Alder Creek Road till you really get up to 4th of July Pass. So this will cover the corridor, fill in from 4th of July Pass down to Wolf Lodge, the restaurant down there, that area, which then connects with, for Verizon customers, it'll connect onto their towers that are further to the west. So, and they'll probably state about that, but it'll give them continuity all the way up to top of 4th of July Pass. Once you go over 4th of July Pass, they have another segment right now that they don't have coverage on, that they're looking to fill in also past Highway 3 to the east. So there's a gap there also, but you can't get the signals over the top. Our technology nowadays, you used to be able to put things up on mountaintops and you could blast signal. Technology now needs to be consolidated and isolated, not to interfere with your existing frequencies outside, neighboring frequencies from another tower. So that's why you wouldn't want to put it top of 4th of July, because it blasts and interfere with towers on both sides. This one plays in really nice with the whole network and the other carriers, which are to the west. If they should choose to go co-locate here in the future, it'd play in really nice with their towers.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'd probably turn it over, probably have Ann Watanabe speak next.
Okay,
One's on Zoom.
okay. That's Ann?
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, you
Please
can-
announce yourself and go
Okay.
right ahead.
Okay, yes, very good. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Ann Watanabe, 109 South First Street, Roslyn, Washington, 98941. I am the counsel for the applicant. And I would like to start by thanking the board for giving the preamble about the federal jurisdiction on the particular issues that are essentially preempted from the local jurisdiction. And I would like to thank Amy for doing the project review. And I want to make sure that my letter is properly introduced into the record. My letter is on behalf of the applicant is in response to the hearings examiner's decision. And so the issues that I addressed in this letter are focused on the hearings examiner's open-ended questions. And so first of all, the applicant agrees with the hearings examiner's decision to approve the application with the conditions that are outlined in approval condition 8.1 through 8.18. So we agree with those. And what was very interesting to me, and I don't know to the extent to which the board would like to discuss the monopine or the other quote, the suggestions that the hearings examiner made, which would be outside the condition of approval perspective. It's very important for me that his suggestions are outside the conditions of approval. And so those two things are the tower height, which the condition is mentioned, and also the suggestion for a monopine. So I mentioned those in my letter that you have before you. Obviously, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at it, but as Mr. Weiss mentioned, we do not agree with either one of those suggestions. The tower height and the monopine are not something that we support. The tower height would preclude the proper transmission of the equipment as designed. The 150-foot tower height is essential to get us over the topography and things that challenge us getting out to the broader network. So on the tower height issue, we got to have the maximum that you allow, and the hearings examiner has approved that. The monopine issue is a funny one because he suggests that you look at it, but then he's very non-conclusive about why he wants you to look at it. And he also has his many statements of why the monopine doesn't need to be included as a condition of approval. And you'll see that in my letter. If you have it in front of you, you might not. It's on page 3 in the first paragraph. He just says things suggesting that if you don't want to put in a monopine as a condition of approval, then you should go ahead and approve it with the conditions that are in the conditions of approval. And he suggested that paint, and we do agree with the blending in with the paint, the condition 8.11, to blend it in. So he suggests that, either paint or a monopine would adequately mitigate to perhaps the one neighbor might see the top of the tower, and that a monopine would not provide the expected benefits over painting, and that monopines take up more space and they can be more unsightly and more visible than less extreme concealment measures such as painting, which the applicant has agreed to do. I'm just lifting some things out of my letter, short of reading it verbatim to you. And Verizon and Inland Cellular agree that a monopine is not warranted because of the limited visual impacts from the self-support that is proposed. So we recommend that you approve it with that condition of 8.11 to blend it in with the environment. And I do want to mention the property values because that was something that was mentioned by Mr. Mathis, who has requested this public hearing. The hearings examiner, I believe, properly balanced the property value issue with aesthetics, basically to say that there's a very difference between the impacts you might think from looking at a tower versus the economic benefits of what the wireless services are provided from that tower. So I think the hearings examiner did a really good job on that, and he reserved himself from making an opinion, and he explicitly said the economic impacts from property values is not a reason to deny the application. We completely agree. And in my letter, I bring up evidence that the applicant is in the industry, and we have property and we sell it. And we have, over the last couple of years and recently, sold over 8 parcels of land in rural areas of Idaho that have an existing or a proposed tower on the property, which the buyers purchased to construct a home. knowing that a tower would be very visible and near to them. So every buyer and every property is unique, and the applicant also has 2 pending sales in Washington, one with a tower and one with a permitted but not yet constructed tower. So these properties are rural, they're 3 to 5 acres in size. The tower is visible, is plainly visible. In one or more cases, the tower is right next to a structure and the buyers don't mind. So like the hearings examiner said, that argument about who's going to buy what and who cares about what is very fluid when it comes to the market and market conditions. But I know that our properties, for whatever reason, are worth more now than they were before the tower was constructed years prior. And of course, no one can argue about the benefits that wireless services bring in terms of economic value. So if we want to ask the Commission to look at mitigating economic impacts, I think we're bringing a lot of economic impact by trying to increase services, not just along I-90, but to the community at large, around Wolf Lodge, and those areas, and along the highway, and in rural and recreational areas. It brings a lot of economic development. So those, I think the key points for the hearings examiner left a little bit open was the tower height and the monopine and the property values, and I think we properly addressed all of those. And I would just say that none of those are conditions of approval, and the applicant agrees with all of the conditions of approval. So with that, I will take any questions, and I believe somebody from Verizon might be on Zoom. I don't see him here. We were having difficulties earlier. But with that, I'll just leave it open for any questions with the time that we have left.
Commissioner Brooks? No.
No questions.
I have no questions. Thank you. Is there anyone else with the applicant who would like to speak?
Yeah, hi, this is Paul Slotemaker, and I'm representing Verizon Wireless. I work for Tilson as a consultant for Verizon Wireless. Address is 2450 Northwest 144th Avenue, Beaverton, Oregon, 97006. So I don't need to add much more. Verizon would be attaching their antennas or co-locating their antennas onto this tower. So they're very interested in this tower to provide their own service, which would be separate from Inland Cellular, which would be also on this tower. And I don't need to just repeat everything. Amy did a great job with her presentation. I think Ann did a great job stating their case, and Verizon is in agreement with what she has to say, and would like to see this application approved based off of the hearings examiner's recommendation for approval and the conditions in the report. And with that said, I'm available for any questions as well.
Any questions?
I have no questions.
I have no questions. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else want to speak on behalf of the applicant? No? Okay. We will move into public testimony. Everyone has 3 minutes to speak. I'm going to start. There's a group testimony. Mark Mathis wants to speak. If you're going to speak for a group, I have to confirm that the rest of the members in the group are in attendance. Kevin Swanson, are you here? Here. Thank you. Ron Hartman? Here. Thank you. David Purcell? Here. Thank you. Carrie Mathis? Thank you. Lynn Purcell? Thank you. Is it Craig Kerwin? Or Ciarg? C-I-A-R-G? Kerwin? Last name Kerwin? In Hayden? Ember Gregorio? Is that, are you raising your hand back? Okay. Forgive me here. Brigian Gregorio? Thank you. Judy Barton? Okay. Kevin Swanson?
Yeah, you already called.
Yes, I did. Dee Dee Swanson. Is there?
She's not here.
No? Okay. So I believe it's Craig Kerwin is not here. Can we do that, Pat?
Yeah, if there's somebody else that wants to, if there's somebody else who wants to donate their time in favor of the group presentation, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so why don't you go ahead, Mark, come on up, and this is opposed. And you have, I believe is it 15 minutes?
Yeah,
Per group?
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Perfect. All right, as you said, my name is Mark Mathis. I live at 17028 East Alder Creek, and I actually live in Idaho, not Washington or Oregon. And I'm here to represent basically the Wolf Lodge community and myself as well. I'm a retired Air Force fighter pilot. I served 21 years in the Air Force, and I've lived out on Alder Creek for 11 years. I'm going to talk to you guys today because obviously it's an emotional issue, but I don't think you can make decisions necessary based on the public's emotion. And so as I go through this, I'm going to give you reasons why you need to oppose this, and I think that's your job. So I'm going to get started, and we're going to cover quite a few things. So I've got some time, so let's get rocking. So first of all, as you know, per the Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code, you guys, the commissioners, who we have all voted for, you are not allowed to recommend a CUP for approval unless the proposal adequately addresses site constraints or hazards and adequately mitigates any negative environmental, social, and economic impacts. So your own rules, Kootenai County's rules, say you cannot approve this unless those three things in red have been proven mitigated. And I'm going to show you that they have not. And so according to the Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code, you have to vote no. That is your job, and that's what we elected you to do. So first of all, if this slide will go, not moving. Can you click the next slide, please? Okay, we'll just talk environmental impacts. I know I cannot get into the whole 5G health thing because the FCC has said you can't do it because of that. I will say there is a ton of people sitting behind me that thinks the FCC is full of it. And I think you might hear a little bit of testimony on that, but we're going to get into that too. So I just want to briefly cover a different type of environmental impact that the FCC does not address, and that's cell phone tower fires. I'm not going to go over every bit of it, but as you can see, there is a risk involved. It's a giant 150-foot tall metal lightning rod sitting out there, and we all know about fire season, we know about fire danger, so we are introducing an element into a rural area that takes KFCR probably about 30 to 45 minutes to get out there. I mean, let's face it, the roads, they're county roads, but they're still dirt roads, up hills, there's traffic, so you can go to the next slide, please. And as you can see, cell phone tower fires are real. And there's something we need to consider. Next slide, please. And the next slide. So, right there in that corner is where they're going to put the cell tower, or is where they want to put it. That is my house right there. This road travels from Alder Creek down to my house. That is my driveway. It does cross a couple other people's land. And then there's the access road. So if this has an issue with any form of fire and that spreads north, you have just cut off my only way to get out, me, my wife, my kids, everybody, because that's the only driveway I have. So I just want you guys to be aware that should there be an issue, you have cut off my only escape route. So I can't get out if there's any kind of issue. So slide, please. So that's kind of, I think, a fair environmental impact that we need to look at. Social impact. Take a look around this room. Please lift your head. Do you think all these people are here in support of a cell tower? I would say no. So I think they're supposed to raise their hands. So I would say, I'm going to ask you, I'm raising my hand because I am against this cell tower. So does it look like that they have mitigated the negative social impact? Remember, that's one of your jobs. Look at all the comments you've received. How many for and how many against? there's another negative social impact that if you approve this, the applicants have not mitigated it. Here's some quotes from some realtors in town, because we're going to get into the economic impacts here. I think it would affect, if a cell tower was built, the sellability of a home, because some people, whether or not the FCC, because they can't control our thoughts yet, believe cell towers emit radiation. It would be like living near power lines in some people's eyes. Okay? People are very leery about being around or near cell towers for health reasons because of 5G service. That would be at least a third to half of your potential buyers. We're going to get into the economic impact, but you can see it does have a social impact. And I would say, based on the attendance here today, it has obviously not been mitigated. Otherwise, we wouldn't have all these people here against this. Let's go to the next one, which is, I think, the biggest one. And I think the hearing examiner was too afraid to call a spade a spade. Basically, multiple surveys, first of all, prove cell towers impact property values. I just heard their lawyer say, well, the buyers knew when they bought the property that there was a cell tower there. Sure, I could sell my property for a penny and nobody's going to care if there's a cell tower there. So I'm not saying that a property won't be purchased if there's a cell tower there. What I'm saying is, right now, my property has no cell tower next to it, no cell tower in the view. That equates to a certain property value. If you allow a cell tower to get put next to my property and in my view, my property value will decrease. That is a fact. I could line experts, buyers, realtors up out that door, and they will all tell you that cell towers, just like power lines, negatively impact property values. It's not that I couldn't sell my property. Of course I could. But if it's worth $1 million today, you put the cell tower there, and now it's worth $800,000, that is not mitigating the economic impact. I know I may be just one person. Future buyers of the land, they're right. Spiker, he wants to sell his land. They're going to know there's a cell tower going in, and they will pay in accordance. But I bought that property. I have a current property value with no cell tower. And so now, if you allow this, which I think your rules say you can't if it negatively impacts me economically, then you're stealing $200,000 of equity from me. It's that plain and simple. Here's just some surveys, and I have them on the slides. 1,000 surveys responded. 94% said cell towers would impact their interest in a property and the price they'd be willing to pay for it. 79% said they would never want to purchase or rent a property near a cell tower. And 90% of the people say they're concerned about the increasing number of cell towers and antennas. So obviously this is a big issue, and it's a big economic impact. Next slide, please. There you go. Properties located, and this is in a city where the houses are packed. I'm already within 0.72 kilometers of the cell tower, and out in the country, even though we have 5, 10, 20 acre parcels, a cell tower impacts all the people around this. We don't have to be right under it. We didn't move out to Wolf Lodge to be looking at a cell tower or have a 5G. And oh, by the way, if you look at the applicant's brief, it's very important to note, they said this will have little to no impact on Wolf Lodge cell service. Their little antennas to maximize coverage are aimed down towards the highway. So it's not like Wolf Lodge is getting a benefit of cell service from this. This is just shining down for about a 3-mile section of the highway that Verizon doesn't really cover well. I think you might hear later that T-Mobile and some other carriers might provide a little better coverage. There's another survey that said, I'd say up to 20% price drop. Next slide, please. Here are some realtors who are these are experts in the real estate industry. This Dean Rogers said, people want the view. They don't want to be looking at a big steel structure. Cell tower could easily affect it 10 to 20%. And he's only been showing properties since the mid-'80s. I asked somebody else, cell towers are a big deal to a lot of people, Mark. You could decrease as much as 15%. And another realtor said, yep, they're also guessing 10 to 15%. So so we've seen studies as high as 20. Local real estate experts say it will affect my property value 10 to 20%. Slide, please. I think it's important to note, I Google searched just to put something up on the slide. That's my cell coverage at my house right now. I've had cell coverage since I bought it. So while there is some truth that if you bring cell service out to rural areas, that is sometimes can be helpful, I've got great 5G, which I don't wish I didn't have, but I don't have a choice. I've got great cell coverage right now, and I've had it since I bought it. So this cell tower does nothing to impact my cell service. I bought it knowing I had cell service, and I still currently have cell service, and I'm right next to where they want to put the cell tower. I've got lots of 5G. And the next slide. So there's my current view on the left, and there's my crude attempt to show what a cell tower plopped in my view would look like. It actually looks a little better because I did some logging. So there you go. So if you want to buy a house, and that's the view you have, and now I have to try to sell my house, and that's the view I have, do you think anybody might notice it and might not want to pay what I'm asking for it? So next slide, please. So I am going to talk a little bit about some real estate 101, because I think you can read all the surveys, but you guys are intelligent. You have been put here to make smart decisions. So I'm going to give you a 30-second real estate discussion. Every house has its own pros and cons. We know that. The more pros, the more buyers that are interested in that house. A single-level house always sells for more and is more desirable than a house that's two-story, because nobody over the age of 60 wants to buy a two-story house and walk up and carry laundry. So a single-level house is the best. Got it. So for me, out where I live, I have some pros. I mean, I live in a great neighborhood, the Wolf Lodge area. I'm kind of, sort of, only 20, 25 minutes from town. And I have gorgeous, gorgeous views off to the west. And I have a nice size house. Okay. So, but there's some people who are I don't want to drive that driveway to your house. And so I have some cons already against me. And so now that maybe takes my pool of buyers from 100 down to 50. Well, now, if you put a cell tower right next to my property, and everybody has said buyers care about these things, you have just shrunk my buyer pool. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, that if you shrink a buyer pool, you have now decreased the amount of people that want to buy the property, and therefore, how do you get your property sold? You have to lower the price. I mean, it's common sense. I don't think I need to line up 200 realtors to tell you that if you have a factor affecting your property that people care about and they don't want there, that when you go to try to sell it, you are fighting a huge, huge hurdle. So I think I've taken my time. I know some other people want to speak, but the bottom line is, final slide, please. I do want to remind you, the Kootenai County regulations say you shall not may not, shall not approve a CUP unless environmental, social, and economic impacts have been mitigated. And I can tell you for a fact, cold, hard fact, I lose property value, and that is a negative economic impact. I may be one person, that doesn't matter. I'm a Kootenai County resident. Unlike the applicants, I'm even an Idaho resident, and your job is to protect me and do what's right per your own laws. So, thank you very much. What questions do you have for me?
Please just raise your hand if you are in agreement. I don't believe there's any questions, except is this presentation in the record?
Yes.
Or
I think it is now.
Yeah.
1004.
Yeah, the doc, okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both of you too. Thank you.
Let me go ahead and read some names of people who would like to speak, who are opposed. The first one is Charles Coates. Is Charles here? Oh, he does not wish to speak, excuse me. Does not wish to speak, but he's opposed. Next, these are people who do not wish to speak. John Powell does not wish to speak, is opposed. Robert Neal, forgive me for probably not pronouncing it right, Traub, Opposed? Does not wish to speak. Samuel Mathis? Opposed? Does not wish to speak. Christine Traub? Opposed? Does not wish to speak. Bettina Whipple? Opposed? Does not wish to speak. James Ginther? Opposed? Does not wish to speak. And if anyone does want to speak, even though you put does not wish to, just let me know. Opposed, does not wish to speak is Jessica Ost. Sharon Allison, opposed, does not wish to speak. Dwayne Gross, opposed, does not wish to speak. Tanya Osterson, opposed, does not wish to speak. Luke Summer, opposed, does not wish to speak. Noah Sanchez, opposed, does not wish to speak. Melody Burns, opposed, does not wish to speak. Michael Burns, opposed, does not wish to speak. I have some folks here that did not answer whether they wanted to speak, but I'll call your name. Opposed, Bill Brazel. Did you want to speak? No. Yes? No. Oh, no, okay. Jen Noel, opposed? No? Sandra Turner, opposed? Did you want to speak? No? Okay. May wish to speak. Tony Langella, opposed?
Yes.
Would you like to speak? No? No? Okay. Lori Daub, opposed, may wish to speak. Would you like to speak? Come on up. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Lori Daub, D-A-U-B, and I live in Post Falls, Idaho. My question is, the purpose, as I understood, the purpose for this tower is to give cell access to I-90. Am I correct in that?
That's what it sounds like, that there's
Okay.
gaps on the interstate
Okay.
of service.
Okay, so part of living in Idaho is you're gonna have gaps in your service. You know that that's the way it is. I teach online. I know that if I'm gonna buy a piece of property, I need to make sure there is already current internet access. I don't look for property that I'm going to demand that there's access on the internet. And my other understanding is that these 5G cell towers have a very small radius. And if we're looking at a 9-mile span, what I thought I heard, how many towers are actually going to be there to cover that 9-mile radius? And what other alternatives are there? I'm not convinced that 5G is the requirement, the necessary tower that needs to be there. Because there's cell service in a lot of places that has never required 5G. And so I'm not convinced that this is something that has to happen, because I think that there's other alternatives, other avenues. There's certainly not going to be a school there, which is one of the primary reasons for putting in, accessible internet is for schools. They're not going to be building schools on this guy's land. And so I fail to be convinced that this is really a requirement. If you've got a 9-mile radius, you've got 9-mile radiuses all over the place, including going up Lewiston Grade. There's gaps all along the highway, and that's part of Idaho. If I want steady service, I go to Washington, I go to Seattle, I go someplace where I know and am convinced. And that is a function of change, as you've mentioned. I've heard a lot about change, but it's also a function of open space. And I think that it's really a preservation of the Idaho way of life to just chill and take it easy and not be in such a big rush. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up are people who have selected they would like to speak and are opposed. Randy Neal, come on up. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Randy Neal. I work out in Wolf Lodge every day with my wife, and was asked by a family that's a property owner out there to speak on their behalf that they don't want this 5G tower going up. But the main point that I would use to argue against this is Coeur d'Alene is a tourist economy. When people come to Coeur d'Alene, they come for fishing and hunting and hiking, all the beautiful landscapes. You know, just a couple days ago, I was driving out to work and I saw a bald eagle swooping down at Higgins Point. And I would rather see a bald eagle swooping down with the grace and majesty of the mist and the majestic trees behind it rather than a giant ugly 5G tower. And they can talk about painting it to make it look more aesthetically pleasing, but it's not. That's a misnomer. There's no amount of paint that's going to cover that up. So it's just kind of a joke. I think overall that it would harm the ecotourism of Coeur d'Alene. We have wildlife photographers that go out to Wolf Lodge to photograph those eagles all the time. And they'll have to angle their shots so they make sure they don't get this new tower in there. It just, other than just the community doesn't want it, I think that, I appreciate your guys' time and consideration in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, who would like to speak, and forgive me if I mispronounce this here, it's either Nathan Well or Nathan Weiss. Oh, your page got mixed in there, so forgive me. That's how it was handed to me, so forgive me here. The stack of opposed still. Who would like to speak? Eugene Kalinowski, come on up. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So I, as well as everybody here, lives in Idaho, and what I want to bring up is only 3 minutes, so it's not much to say in that time. Definitely, there are alternatives to 5G towers. If you look from time, initially it was a 2G service for phone only. Then the device on the hand as a phone evolved to become a powerful computer on the hand. So there's a need for data to transfer back and forth. And that's why they're creating additional needs for stronger waves in the area to transfer the data. So that's why we get to 3G, 4G, now 5G. It's not a question when, it's just a question of when, but 6G is coming, 7G, and so forth, because there will be demand for more and more and more. So once you have the tower up, you're opening the floodgate to additional blasting around the area. And that is affecting the wildlife, the people that lives there, the travels, and so forth. So the whole, it's not just financial side. You have to look from the farther picture. What's going to happen then? Once the tower is up, there's no way to say who is going to hang up what kind of device. And we know that there is nothing less it's going to be more powerful pieces there. Verizon, as you live here from Oregon, they don't care. They want business. That's what they're after. It's just common sense that if we want to preserve the Idaho, we need to fight on the local level. Federal government, they don't live here. They just regulate. Who knows? Those FCC regulations, they were done decades of years ago, when the 2G maybe was existent, regular, not the brick phones on the car that people have. Maybe some of you remember. That's what the regulations were done, and they were not changed. There's no scientific data that they are safe, the 5G is safe. It's opposite. there are evidence that people get sick. There is a recent article on the internet I read a couple of days ago. Family went for the vacation. They live in the rented house for 2 weeks next to the tower, and they got sick, all of them. Headaches, stomach issues, tiredness, sleepless, and it just, once they move out, and now they're suing whatever the rental place and the area, the town, for that, because once they move out, the health got restored, just by simple fact. And we need to preserve the environment. The animals, they have no say. We have to be the one to talk for them. And it's affected. I like to see the eagles. You drive and you see them. It's just a joy. You don't see them in the cities, and that's why the people come here to Idaho. Once the human, you have to just one more thing I want to bring. There is a technology in military that they were blasting enemy lines with the waves that similar to 5G. They were weakening the enemy lines, confusing them, not killing, but confusing, so they have no full capacity of defending themselves.
Mr. Kalinowski.
It's the same technology.
I'm sorry, but the 3 minutes is
I
up.
understand.
But thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, opposed, wish to speak, Teresa Roth.
Hi, I'm Teresa Roth, and I've been very active with the Stop Smart Cities Idaho group. And I think you already know the issues with smart cities, and you know that 5G is a very important component of those. And I'm not going to pretend that we are just going to talk about property values and not about health, safety, and the environment, because those are the real issues, whether or not an unelected, unaccountable government agency says we can't talk about them. We are going to talk about them. Those are the issues. First of all, I just want to talk about 5G versus 4G. Not all cell coverage is created equal. 4G, which is what we have, which is what the people here have said from Wolf Creek Lodge, they already have that. That is sufficient for the needs and the desires of the people who live there and for almost all people everywhere. 5G is not a service for residents and citizens. 5G is a service for a tyrannical government that wants a high enough bandwidth to impose a Internet of Things, and intelligent transportation systems, which require a vastly higher bandwidth than regular voice and data do. We don't need and we don't want 5G at all, and we don't want to be told by unelected, unaccountable federal agencies that we can't talk about their health effects and we can't talk about their environment effects. And you are here as representatives of us. You are elected and you are accountable. Okay, I'm going to end up with just something that came up in my feed, because if I said it, somebody's going to say, oh, I'm crazy, I'm a conspiracy theorist. So I'm going to read something that a PhD who was a vice president of Pfizer and who got the heck out of Pfizer when he realized what the heck was going on with COVID had to say. This is from Dr. Mike Yaden. Quote, "You have to be brave now. We're in the middle of the biggest crime in history. It is global. It has the intent of control, removing everybody's freedom, and it will involve killing further millions. It is long planned. If you comply with this tyranny, it will end with the loss of your liberty and possibly your life. That's what's going to happen if everybody chooses to do nothing." So you're being told that if you vote against this, you will be sued. Go ahead, vote against it, get sued. We're all behind you. We want you to be sued.
I'm sorry,
That's how we
folks.
want you to use your money. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, opposed, wish to speak, Danielle Gregorio? Gregorio.
You're very close.
You have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Danielle Gregorio, and I live at 14665 East Antelope Court, about a mile from proposed tower. I moved to this property mainly because it was more than 3 miles to the nearest cell tower. That was one of the absolutes that needed to be met when I was searching for a house. 4-bed, 2-bath, more than 5 acres, and no cell towers. I have been aware of the many problems associated with cell towers for years and wanted to be as far away from them as possible. In my former house, I was surrounded by 4 different towers within a mile of my residence, and I had many health problems associated with that. Those health problems have disappeared after moving to my current house. Speaking of my current home, I have a beautiful, unimpeded view of the mountains surrounding I-90, and currently I can see no man-made structures of any kind from my deck, not even a utility pole. This tower might change that. I say might because when the applicant did their balloon test, he did not inform the neighborhood it was taking place, almost as if they didn't want to alert the neighbors so they could check if their views were being intruded upon by an eyesore or alert them to a cell tower presence. Speaking of my neighbors, we all agree that living away from the city and missing out on all those so-called conveniences make for a better life. Some people have lived here for over 30 years and have enjoyed this rural neighborhood and fought to keep it rural. So for the applicant and Carl Granrath to allege that real estate values would not be impacted, in fact possibly improved because yay, there's cell service here, is egregious. The types of people that seek a rural property know what they are getting and welcome it. As I've said before, it was one of my main criteria during property hunting. Also, as a licensed realtor for 20 years, I can testify to the fact that a property listed near a cell tower is exponentially harder to sell. The public is learning about the dangers of RF and EMF radiation, and whether you and I agree on the validity of the studies that prove it, people have a perceived notion that it is dangerous, and correct or not, they make decisions based on this fear. I have witnessed several clients note that there's a cell tower nearby a potential home and immediately discount it. It happens much more often than the telecom companies would want you to believe. I've had people see a cell tower further away than the 770 feet that this tower is set to be placed and say, nope, turn around, and not even go into the property. But there's a gap, they say. I'm here to argue that it isn't a significant gap. AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon show coverage at this location. When you go into their stores and ask to see coverage maps, they pull up the map and show you it's covered. However, at the last meeting, the Verizon rep stated that this tower would remedy a 4-mile gap. When I drove this section with my husband, went from my house all the way down to 4th of July Pass, down to Wolf Lodge, we have T-Mobile and AT&T, there was a teeny tiny gap. T-Mobile, about 10 seconds, AT&T, maybe 16 to 20 seconds. That's under a mile. To me, this is not a significant gap by any means, and to put a tower 770 feet from a residential home, increase the fire risk significantly, and reduce home values by up to 20% doesn't make sense. We do not want this tower in our neighborhood, and as elected officials, I respectfully ask you to help us make this a reality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, folks, I've asked you, if you want to agree, raise your hands. If you want to continue clapping, I will ask you to leave, okay? It's just a simple courtesy that's being requested here. And we're almost done. The next person who is opposed and would like to speak is Joe Whipple. You have 3 minutes.
Joe Whipple, 16781 Alder Creek Road, Coeur d'Alene. These opinions are offered with respect to all. The CUP proposal offers to, quote, fill the gap of communication along Interstate 90, as Planner Hillen said. According to the staff report, the staff analysis section C, paragraph 3 states, the proposed facility will fill a gap of communication along Interstate 90. Furthermore, due to a very small coverage gap, and I want to emphasize, very small coverage gap, end quote. So has anyone come forward to complain of a lack of service because of a gap of service from either of these carriers? And if so, how many and where are they? From the staff report, on page 11, paragraph 3, one carrier supplied a RF map which claims existing coverage is minus 100 to minus 110 decibel milliwatts dBm, or is non-existent in the proposed small coverage gap area, while also stating that the minimum dBm for a usable signal is minus 120 dBm. The staff report also states that Verizon's response to providing supporting engineering data produced the RF maps was, quote, exact data about the sites is proprietary and cannot be disclosed due to competitive reasons, end quote. So, by their own supplied data to community development, there is no significant gap in coverage. Besides, the carrier supplied crowdsourcing data compiled from willing app users, a cell mapper site, and carrier supply of drive test data. Is the public and this board supposed to rely on computer-generated RF maps derived from proprietary information to consider as technical grounds of probative evidence in seeking this CUP application approval? The reality is likely one in which the proposed coverage area is actually designed as an overlap of existing coverage and would not be considered a significant gap in coverage as litigated in the Ninth Circuit Court, which also covers Idaho. Please review my October 5th presentation. I'll include that next. Our neighborhood is deeply apprehensive about the drive for these types of conditional use permits and turning our rural designated area to commercial use, primarily serving the request of, in this case, the applicants and the lessor, while it simultaneously opens the door to future attempts at commercial development. Finally, there should be a wider and deeper discussion about the pros and cons regarding future cell phone tower construction in Kootenai County. Legally, this should be an easy win for the county. By the way, Mr. Weiss, with respect, is incorrect in stating there is no cell phone service, if I understood correctly. I have excellent cell phone service. Respectfully request you deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more unopposed. Would like to speak. Stephanie Fetzer.
His will be entered as B1005.
Hi, I'm freezing. I'm sorry. My name is Stephanie Fetzer. I live at 1217 South Reynolds Road in Coeur d'Alene, and I'll try to keep this brief and not repeat what other people have said. I'm going to read from my notes. When I moved to Coeur d'Alene 3 years ago, I moved specifically looking for property that did not have Wi-Fi access and very limited cell service. I have twin daughters. I've shared this story with you before, that we lived in California and they suffered from EMF sickness that was absolutely debilitating. At 16 years old, they regressed probably to about 3-year-old cognitive skills. They could not write or read. They laid in bed with headaches. Everything made them feel sick. We later found out that there were 20 cell antennas hidden in the fascia of our church, and they got progressively sicker as we attended that church. So when we moved here, we found property that, thank God, was 2.25 miles away from the nearest cell tower. They recovered almost instantly. At 17, they thrived, attending dances here in Coeur d'Alene, involved in their church young adults and youth programs. They volunteer at the church. Now the nearest cell tower is 0.6 miles from our house, and we're slowly starting to see symptoms reoccur. I'm worried. I'm worried when I hear you give a speech saying we have to follow FCC guidelines because it's the federal law. Someone needs to take a stand. I want to talk about SB 649, which was a bill passed in California in 2017. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was basically a bill that echoed federal law saying that you could not deny the installation of an antenna or tower for any reason other than whatever the bogus reasons are, aesthetics and whatnot. Interestingly enough, the firefighters union got a carve out. Very powerful union in California, lots of money, lots of power, lots of voters. They got an exemption. They didn't talk about why they got the exemption. They just said you could not install a small cell antenna on a firehouse. What we knew from the testimony was that there had been a 2004, I'm just going to read this from an article, a 2004 SPECT brain scan study of firefighters in Central California found brain abnormalities in all of the men tested, as well as delayed reaction time, lack of impulse control, and cognitive impairment. None of the men worked hazmat, so chemical exposure was ruled out. All of the firefighters tested had suffered from sleep disturbances, headaches, lack of focus, and memory loss following installation of a tower adjacent to their station 5 years earlier. They sued the wireless company that told them the towers were perfectly harmless. But Section 704 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 does not allow health to be taken into consideration when citing a tower, so the judge dismissed the lawsuit. They still got the carve-out in the bill. So in California, you cannot put an antenna on a firehouse. If it's not safe for the firefighters, it's not safe for our kids, it's not safe for us. And we elected you to represent us, not the FCC. The FCC is made up of 5 commissioners who were lobbyists or attorneys for the telecom industry. They don't mention health, they don't mention environment on their website. That is not a concern for them or these guys at this table. It should be a concern for you because we elected you to represent us, not the telecom industry. I know my time is up. Your van says I'm in your corner. What does it mean? Are you in the corner of AT&T and Verizon, or are you in our corner? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have any that are neutral or in favor. Is that correct? No comment that's neutral or in favor. Okay. The applicant can rebut this. They have 15 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yep, I should have asked that. Go ahead. If you're on Zoom, you have 3 minutes.
There's a Joe and a Pamela that might want to speak.
Is this opposed?
I'm the applicant.
Oh, okay. Is this public comment that or?
I can't tell. All I can tell you is there's 2 people on Zoom that may want to speak.
Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak opposed or neutral or in favor?
I'm with the applicant. Am I allowed to respond to the public testimony?
Well, we will have a rebuttal in a minute, and you'll have 15 minutes. I'm just trying to get any additional public testimony. Is there anyone on the telephone line? Jonathan? No. Okay. So the applicant has 15 minutes to rebut.
Okay, for the record, Ann Watanabe, counsel for the applicant, 109 South First Street, Boston, Washington, 9941. I want to thank the public for their comments, and obviously, again, I want to thank the commission and the board for bringing up the preemptive federal jurisdictional issues, so I don't really want to tap into those. Let me just say that on the matters of wildlife and fire, the applicant concurs with the agencies that have no issues with those matters. And I would also suggest that on the environmental issues, the applicant does a full-blown NEPA. And so that is a federal version of the State Environmental Policy Act, and there have been no issues shown with that in terms of anything. So we have done a very robust environmental review for this project that's required by the FCC in addition to what's required at the local jurisdiction. And I do want to make sure that the commissioners and the board understand that we have provided drop call data. So there's been some discussion about that, and Verizon RF engineer people did provide some drop call data. And the hearings examiner himself had said driving through there, he has not had service. So I just want to point that out from his analysis. In terms of social impacts, I did not hear any examples really given from the public, but I can say that there's an immense amount of studies out there about the benefit of 5G. And in my letter, I conclude by just suggesting that the enormous amount of federal and state money that is being allocated to bring broadband to propel the economic and social benefits that broadband brings to rural communities is eminent. It's prevalent, and it's obvious because there's a lot of money being put towards that. And that is to basically decrease what is a well-known commoner called the digital divide between the rural and urban areas. And all these things that our proposed tower hopes to do with bringing additional service through the I-90 corridor And it's not just with that small corridor, because this is a broader network. And so getting to above 150 feet means getting out to a broader network, means that we can touch more and more, and it emanates out and farther to bring more services and better services to more and more people. And so that is the strategy and the goal of the broadband deployment strategy of the federal and the state government. And so all those programs are enticed to bring services to the rural areas and to increase E911 communications for public safety, not just along highways, but in rural and recreational areas. I know Northern Idaho is beautiful. It's rural. You got to have service. No real good service at Spirit Cutoff. We know these things. We're bringing services to these areas that are important. Boaters, tribes who need services out in these areas to support their communities as well. So we're all very aware of this, but I just want to make sure that people know we are doing a very, very robust environmental review of our tower. And in terms of Mr. Mathis, in terms of his property values, let me just suggest that he has noted in his own comment that he has several things against his property in terms of a long road. He elected to build in a place that's got a lot of snow. He admits that these are strikes against him. Who can say at the time of the day when he goes to sell what is going to be the reason of why his property sells or not? But I'm sure he will find a buyer because it is beautiful out there, just like we have. And people, there are people out there who will buy and don't seem to mind that there's a tower there. And again, all these other suggestions about values are all speculative. I cannot authenticate the quotes that were presented by Mr. Mathis, and this and that is all opinion. Again, we have sold properties with towers on them, and people know it. And these services are going to serve more than schools. Obviously, broadband goes way broader than schools. It's health care, it's telecommunications. Whatever people say, if you have the ability to have wireless and you don't want to use it, don't use it. People who want to live out in these rural communities because COVID and remote workforce, they want it. I need it, I have it, and I like it. A lot of people need it, and that is a value added to real estate values, and there's absolutely no question for that. And I think real estate agents will tell you that as well. And there are studies showing that. So I think, again, we sold for market value. I failed to mention that, but we did not sell for $1. We sold our properties for market value, and they sold quickly. So no problem there for us on that one. So, again, we support the hearings examiner's recommendations. They're solid, they're clear, and I appreciate the commissioner recognizing where their jurisdiction lies on these particular matters. And with all due respect to the public, we ask that you approve the project as recommended with the condition. And I would like to offer some time to Mr. Paul Slotemaker, who might want to talk about the coverage area if he so chooses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Paul still on there?
He's still on here.
I'll let Paul go first.
Yeah, I'm still here. Is the floor mine?
Yes.
It is.
All right, thank you, guys. Thanks, Ann, for your testimony, and thank you for really everybody who's testified. That's what this is for, of course, and I'm happy that we have a forum like this where everybody can at least have an opportunity to have their voices heard here. Thanks for everybody for that. Regarding Ann's rebuttal, I don't need to repeat it. I concur with all the points that she made. And again, it's Verizon's position that this proposed facility has met all of the criteria, all the code criteria, and should be approved as the staff and the hearings examiner have already recommended. Just a few additional points regarding the coverage area, like the gap in service and this site filling that gap in service in the surrounding area near this tower, as well as Interstate 90. That information has been provided. There was in the staff report some talk about proprietary information. However, Verizon did come through and provided real-time drive test data, which is like the real on-the-ground data of how much service there is. So that's in the record, and that demonstrates and shows visually the coverage gap along Interstate 90, which translates into really a health and safety issue along that stretch of highway. It's no secret that it can get snowy in the winter and can get treacherous on that road. I've known of a colleague of mine who got stuck, or she didn't get stuck, but there's another motorist that she ran in, that she encountered, who was stuck and had no cell service on this stretch of road in a snowstorm and had to be driven into town. Had she had a cell phone,
the situation could have been resolved much more simply. And this, unfortunately, there were no injuries or anything to report, but it just escalates. We can all imagine what it would be like if there were accidents, and I'm sure there have been, and then you can't phone out. This is really a health and safety needed to improve the health and safety in the area, and that's one of the vital services that this facility would provide. So just wanted to get that in there, remind everybody of that. A lot of this was already spoken about at the hearings examiner's hearing, but I wanted to repeat that. Just looking at my notes here, yeah, Verizon provided that information. Yeah, so I think that like staff and the hearings examiner have already demonstrated that this facility meets the code requirements, and it should be approved with the conditions as they're written. I guess one additional bit of information is regarding property values. Again, I concur with what Ann had to say, and I have seen studies where reliable wireless service is one of the top considerations of prospective home buyers, more so than schools and yards and some other important items that typically come up. People want to be able to make phone calls, especially when the majority of homeowners have cut the cord, meaning that they don't have a landline anymore. So this is this is how they can communicate. And so without reliable wireless service, it puts these properties at a disadvantage. The service provided by this wireless facility would translate into a benefit for the surrounding area. So, of course, I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nathan Weiss, I agree. Just to add, as more people in the summer months on I-90, the technology, more people are using the networks, the signal dissipates. So one time you may drive through that corridor, you'll have a little bit better coverage. I mean, I went through there this fall. I haven't been through there last month and a half, but it's possibly better now, but because there's a lot less traffic and less people using it. As you have many, I understand the residents around there don't want the tower. You have many citizens that this county does go a lot further east than 4th of July Pass. So you've got many people that use that corridor to come into Coeur d'Alene that need better service. Verizon doesn't look to put towers just out willy-nilly anywhere. They're requesting to go on this location, and because they have a need. We don't have anyone here supports that written support, but we have testimony from our customers, 30,000 customers, our customers. Verizon have their customers. They've got trouble tickets, they've got needs which were all put in the hearing prior, emphasizing the need for this corridor to be covered. This is the only stretch in Idaho on I-90 that doesn't have reliable, for Verizon, has coverage. And in Washington, they've got it all the way to Seattle, and I got a Verizon phone, and AT&T doesn't break, T-Mobile does, but fire-wise, we've never had a tower that caught on fire. When there is a fire around our tower, the fire department puts retardant on it to protect the services and keep communication up so they can fight fires. So the health factor is huge. If there's a fire to start from vehicles on I-90, which is probably hugely more likely than any cell towers catching a fire, causing a forest fire or some type of impact, people can call 911. So a huge benefit by having cell service along that corridor. I want to talk personal property rights, and on that, everyone has their personal property rights. I have property in Idaho. I have residence in Benewah, Bonners County. I have a cell tower in my backyard, and we provide cell service there. We were the only provider there. Verizon did put one, but AT&T and T-Mobile are able to utilize that tower because we see the need. Inland Cellular is a 4G carrier, so everyone's 5G phones still uses 4G. So our technology we put on that tower will have for 911 purposes, and most phones can even use it for just general calling and texting. So it's depending on the carrier, but it's there. So we are a 4G carrier, so we check that box. That there's been some health concerns on that. So that's all I have for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that concludes it. I'll take a motion to close public testimony. Of course, Commissioner Duncan's not here, so I think we should continue this and schedule deliberations on January 11th at 10 a.m.
I move that we close public comments, testimony in CUP 23-0003, I-90 Wolf cell site, and continue deliberations on
January 11th
January
at 10
11th.
a.m.
Okay, 10
So I
a.m.
second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Chair Pro Tem Mortari.
Aye. Okay, it is 8:37 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming out.